Welcome to the Data Democracy, presented by renowned O'Reilly author Ole Olesen-Bagneux, empowered by Xenia. Make your data accessible and discoverable by anyone, anywhere, at any time.
Hi everybody, you're listening to The Data Democracy, and I'm your host, Ole Olesen-Bagneux, Chief Evangelist in Xenia and the author of the Enterprise Data Catalog, published by Earley. In this podcast, we explore what the Enterprise Data Democracy is with knowledgeable guests. Today's guest is David Skrobela. David is the CEO, Managing Director of Earley Information Science and specializes in structuring and organizing data, making it findable, usable, and valuable. Earley Information Science builds the information architecture that powers unrivaled customer experience, smart e-commerce, and accelerated business decision-making for Fortune 1000 firms in manufacturing, distribution, retail, and financial services. My takeaways from my conversation with David were, first, a data leader takeaway. If you won't invest in a product manager for the search experience for data, information, and knowledge in your company, don't expect employees to be able to find anything. So you heard this first on the Data Democracy podcast, product manager for search. Second, a data democracy takeaway. Humans are meant to categorize, but if a particular way of organizing data makes sense logically, without having a business need, then David can predict that data quality and data governance will suffer over time. And third, a personal takeaway. David Skrobela is a biologist by training, and his way into data came gradually as he used his background to provide unique perspectives to data management. A reminder that we should all be open to people with all kinds of backgrounds, educational, and so forth, in data. I'm an example of that myself. Okay, enough of me talking. Let's hear what David has to say. Hi, David.
Hi, Ole. Great to be on the podcast today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for joining. I'm very happy to have you on. I have a lot of questions. But first of all, would you care to share with the listeners what you do, something about your career, history, and so forth?
Sure, absolutely. So my name is David Skrobela. I'm currently a managing director at Earley Information Science. We're a consultancy that is focused on information management strategy and information architecture. I can certainly talk more about what our company does. I've been working for about 25 years. It's been an interesting, not straight trajectory. So there's been some turns and pivots that I certainly couldn't have anticipated. I studied human biology in school and was planning to go into public health when I left university, but this is right around 1996. And I was very intrigued by all of the opportunities sprouting up related to information technology and things that were starting to emerge with, at the time, was just known as web development. So started to learn and self-teach. Before I knew it, I was doing network architecture design for a large hospital system in New York City, and spent the first couple of years of my career combining network architecture, systems architecture and administration, and website development and web design. It was probably the early 2000s where I turned to consulting and started working for a consultancy not too unlike the one I'm with today. So a small firm that loves to work with some of the biggest companies in the world. There we were really about documents and content management at scale, meaning we were working with companies as diverse as New York Times to Pratt Whitney to Eli Lilly, across lots of different industries, but they all had similar problems. They were all trying to bring a lot of content that at that point was not even digitized into digital systems, and then think about how they will manage it centrally and start to govern it and all the workflows that went along with that. So that was several years. And then some of the consulting work started to evolve into what was very focused data management and data strategy work. That turned into working for clients, and then taking a full-time role in a data management position. So back in the mid 2000s, there weren't too many data management or enterprise data management and enterprise data governance programs in place. So a lot of what we were doing was we were kind of inventing on the fly. And that was actually really exciting because we had a chance to build frameworks and methodologies without necessarily knowing that they would endure for decades afterwards. So really looking at master data management, enterprise data management was a focus for several years. One of the things that came out of some of that work was, I would say, an early version of data product management. So, many people are obviously familiar with software product management, but we were building data products. So things as maybe esoteric or obscure as algorithms that helped to match and authenticate individuals who were coming in from different entry points and needed to be deduplicated in real time. Those algorithms were actually provided through a variety of access methods and APIs, but they needed central product management. We understood very early that those needed to be treated like products, and also data sets that were being sold to external companies and outside organizations. How do you actually describe the best way to access the data? How do you provide a playbook to use and interpret the data? When you're starting to do that, you're acting as a product manager because, in effect, you're taking on the same roles of communications and training around your products. I then, took a job doing what I would call more familiar software product management, where I was responsible for end-to-end, front-end user experience, customer research, market research, and also the technical aspects of building and delivering software products. So my focus was education technology. So thinking about classroom management and analytics products that were focused on diagnostic and score reporting. So think about students who are taking standardized tests here in the U.S. What does it mean sort of at the individual level? What does it mean at the classroom level? What does it mean at kind of the grade and building level? And building all those different views of the data so different audiences or users could look at those sets of data differently. And obviously, a principal is looking at something much differently than a district administrator versus a classroom teacher. Did that for several years, and then took a break in 2016. Was doing some individual consulting, and at some point between 2016 and 17, joined forces with Earley Information Science. And Seth Earley, our CEO, is somebody I had met a few years prior at a conference, and he was really, talking about knowledge management in ways that I thought were interesting and fascinating. And I had recently built my first knowledge management program. Again, kind of learning as I went, but some of his ideas and his presentation materials were really inspiring. So the company Earley Information Science is focused on a lot of aspects of information, strategy and architecture. As I mentioned, we do a lot of data modeling. We do a lot of design of taxonomies and ontologies, and thing we focus on is really understanding business and user problems, and then designing to those problems or those objectives and priorities. What I love about the company I'm at now, it actually combines elements of, we have these conceptual pillars, we call them solution pillars, which are essentially practices, ways in which we organize and deliver our work. One is focused on products information management. One is focused on customer data management and experience. One is focused on knowledge management, and another on content management. And those are all areas that tap into my own background and experience, having worked in large CMS programs and content web migration projects over the years, knowledge management, and of course data management as well. So we're kind of bringing together many different facets or sub areas of the broader class of information management here at EIS, and it's a great place to be.
Well, it definitely sounds very, very interesting. And like, what is so impressive about that approach, that, or the simply the career that you've had, is that I sense a lot of different domains, a lot of different industries and sectors, right? Um, and just like myself, you have been exposed to the fact that you should apply certain disciplines. You should learn something about managing data, information, and knowledge in a lot of different contexts. And that is also definitely what I see, both as your profile, your company profile, and what you have just explained very briefly, but also very, very succinct. So I would want to know a ton of questions, actually. But you have these wonderful ways of explaining or pointing towards like the main elements that we do, which is data, information, and knowledge management. So basically, like, can you share something about what is your approach to organizing data, like at a high level? What is
Of course.
how do you go about that?
So it starts with understanding and getting the people that we're organizing for to understand this very simple premise of organizing principles. And I'm still not surprised sometimes when I go into a first conversation and use that term, and it sounds a little foreign to the person I'm speaking with. And then we start to go into basic examples or metaphors of how every individual, humans are meant to categorize. They are inclined to think about how they are categorizing or grouping things together. And then the next question becomes, well, what's sort of driving that, right? When you're interacting with organized information, do you actually realize that in the moment, or can you step back and understand what's being done for you, right? A restaurant menu is a very familiar paradigm to everybody, I hope, because everybody should dine out once in a while. It's a very important experience. So
Yeah.
the menu is, it's a basic classification or organization system. Some restaurants, of course, don't get it right, or would probably organize in ways that are not exactly aligned with the way that the the customer might want, but it's a familiar way to start the conversation. So we talk about organizing principles, and then we start to think about what are the basic principles that you need to start the process of organizing information. When we deal with our clients around product information, it's a fairly straightforward process. We start with this idea that there's a natural or logical way to classify all products by what they are, right? It's the classic biological taxonomy applied to physical or maybe virtual information or software products. But you have to start to think about what are the ways that you talk about them that are very much describing what they are, and
Mm.
how can you start to define shared characteristics and attributes. And that helps to start really, the process of designing a hierarchy or a taxonomy at scale, because you're talking about things that are similar, right? Those are your sort of broad concepts. And then you start to think about differentiating factors. That's really where, in a lot of our clients, the value resides. Categories that have very specific attributes or properties are generally ones that don't get enough attention or don't have enough maintenance and management focus. When we talk to product managers or line of business owners, they say that's where their pain points are. So we really get them to start talking about what are the important attributes that you want to ensure are part of this category and can be managed over time, and how will you use it? Because everybody's got a million ideas, and then I believe it's a fun exercise. Some might challenge it. If you can't justify, right, the reasons for a set of attributes and schemas to exist, other than it might be a good idea in a moment in a workshop, that is probably an indicator that the data quality and the governance over time will suffer, because you do have to
Oh,
understand: is there marketing value? Is there supply chain value? Is there You start to map it to individual parts of a value chain in a company, and that's where I think the proof point is, because then you
Mm.
understand these attributes do have very clear departmental or value to a team or a function, or maybe there's horizontal value because they're important across every part of the value chain. But that's a really important process as we talk about not only organizing, but how to prioritize, because organizing can be a very vast and daunting process.
Let me try to get this right. I think this was really, I've never heard this before. Like, so what you're saying is that outside of a knowledge organizing exercise or data organization exercise, if something makes sense logically, but only in the context where you're discussing it as an intellectual idea, you can predict that data quality will suffer over time.
That is correct, and I think it's less about a hard prediction and more about a genuine moment of challenging the idea. And I think the
Mm.
best ideas come out the other side of it, a conversation where if challenged, you can assert or justify some reason for that idea to persist and live on and get investment. Because all of the work that we do is, we understand that, there is a cost, there's a labor cost, there could be a systems cost. And, I'm sure you're very familiar and right about this idea of data debt. Data debt only happens when good ideas never get executed on. And sometimes the execution is very much a result of, well, it was a good idea in the moment, but, looking back, I don't necessarily know that this has long-term value.
Mm. I really like that. I really like that. I mean, that's the other side of the coin, right? How do you so you organize data, of course, but as you mentioned, you you also have to make data findable, usable, and valuable. At the other end of that, or at on the other side of that coin, is the searching part, right? When you have organized your data, you need to be able to search for it in an effective way. So, how is this connected with organizing data, the searchability?
The organizing data and then thinking about the overall effort to manage that data, certainly at scale, is connected with findability. Because again, I think what we like to do, and I think what is very important to think about when you're starting to build a search strategy or a navigation strategy, you really want to think about the mental model of the people that are looking for that information. And I can talk about a high resolution video recording system that's installed in, maybe a government building or a municipal office. Uh, you know, Sort of an abstract example from many of our real clients. Some of the technical products we work with can ostensibly carry 300 to 400 attributes. And I think that's important for a
Yeah.
product lifecycle management system that really needs to think about and understand the interrelationships of how products work in certain environments and testing and R&D. But when we think about moving that through a data supply chain and into a PIM or an MDM system, do all of those attributes need to be moved across that chain, and do they have to be governed with the same level of rigor and attention? And a lot of times the answer is no, because I think what we say is, if we don't understand the purpose for those, and if there's no real use case for, you've got customers that will search for some of those attributes that are very much about how a system is intended to be used in a very confined environment with environmental or operating specifications around humidity and temperature, etc. Then it's probably not a good use of how to include attributes or information into that search experience. We generally like to look at search and say, how are they searching today? And we also then flip it around and say, if they had this information available, which is not available today, would this actually be useful in the future? So it's kind of building a proof of concept for things that are not available, exposing them to real life users and seeing if they are in fact going to be effective ways to build search indexes and weightings for what gets returned in results.
Yeah, I really like this. Is so important for me also. It's something that I have spent a great deal of on my career just simply working with these problems, right? And also it's part of the like the DNA, I dare say, of this podcast, right? The data democracy. There would be a very instinctive drive in wanting to democratize data, to make every single small piece of data or a document, information, knowledge, whatever, make it as searchable and as accessible as possibly can. That would be the initial thought. But you're saying something a little different here, right? Am I getting that right?
I believe there's legitimate value to pre-coordination and curation of, and really only through understanding of people that are using and looking at data. So it's for me and for our firm, it's a combination of the qualitative and quantitative. What do people say they want to do? And if you can observe them and watch their behavior, what are they doing? And then if you just look sort of at a raw log of behavioral analytics and what's going on, are they matching that, or is that wildly different? But those inputs help to inform how you can pre-coordinate and curate your search and your retrieval experience, because I don't think it is generally going to be effective if you just let algorithms by themselves figure out what to present back, because you have that context and you have that knowledge, so why not apply it?
Yeah, of course. I totally agree in this, right? I think, but it's such a delicate, discussions. It can go wrong in so many ways. I bet you have seen some of that. I guess it's.
Yes, it is. And, that's why constant and continuous improvement and looking at and testing and getting feedback on what is happening, right, in your retrieval and search experiences are critical. I talked about, my own experience as a product manager earlier. When we go into clients and they don't have named owners for taxonomy and information architecture or search, we start to talk about what that will look like long term. We say, if you can't hire somebody in, we will help, and you better train somebody to really act as a product manager for that search experience. Because you do need a focused person who is accountable for the actual, it could be precision and recall and doing constant testing and reporting out on what that looks like. Or it could just be a simple get feedback, make sure that you're working with the right development team, whether those are internal or outsourced, to incorporate and implement changes, and work with people that are actually using that search tool.
Yeah, that is that is very important, and I do like that approach a lot, right? I think it also taps into the problem that I've been thinking a lot about this lately, that there's this paradox between IT getting democratized as a service. You can buy pretty much every kind of IT powered capability as a service now, right? As a cloud offering, and that puts you as someone in line of business. That puts you in the position of being an IT person. So everyone in a company is today doing IT, and we call that, or some call that, that IT is becoming democratized. But I see this huge clash between democratizing IT and democratizing data, because the more IT is becoming democratized, and I am not I'm not this I'm not this angry architect that wants to limit the democratization of IT, but there is this paradox, right? That the more we democratize IT, the less data is becoming democratized, right? Because we are creating more and more and more silos.
Yes.
I bet you have met this in a lot of companies. How do you challenge that? How do you approach that problem?
That's a great question. We have a lot of clients who, in the past decade, have spawned, invested, and grown marketing technology organizations that sit inside of marketing and have very little interaction with an also large IT organization. And what happens is you give the marketing technology organization a lot of discretion to buy or build different applications, manage data in pretty separate and isolated ways, and you start to see points of friction or points where what the marketing team is doing can't easily be integrated into the quote unquote IT owned enterprise architecture. So they're basically reaping what they sowed. And we come together and in some cases we are actually trying to facilitate or force conversations when we are told genuinely that there's an interest in bridging those silos and gaps and bringing some of the information flows back together. So we do see it. How do we solve for it? I think it's trying to build common visions around data access and understanding some of the pitfalls of continuous siloed development. And I'm making a point of marketing technology and shadow IT inside of marketing, if that's the term that's still used. It feels a little outdated to me, but there are quasi and very technically oriented people in different parts of any organization now. It could be your marketing team. It could be supply chain, financial planning and analysis. I love and we'll always have conversations with financial planners, people that are responsible at large retailers to figure out how much do we need to replenish. We obviously want to keep inventory at exactly the right level, over time. That's data science in action, and they develop very advanced, I would say, SQL skills and data analytics skills. And at that point, they need to be somewhat autonomous. They don't necessarily and can't be too dependent on specific IT processes where IT is holding the data, and only through a series of tickets can they get access to that data, because they need to be looking at and analyzing and making lots of decisions or guesses in close to real time. So we always have those conversations, and we talk about sort of shared use cases and shared objectives. That generally gets us to places where we can help to make recommendations on solutions that do integrate at the right points. I don't necessarily know that a shared enterprise data architecture at a company as large as Honeywell or 3M is always the objective. But I think we need to find those specific silos and say, this is causing or this is having real impact on a specific part of the business. And we'll help to tell that story through data, and through some kind of set of narratives, and hopefully get to a place where they're sharing.
I love it. I love it. It's always a pleasure to hear a pragmatic answer to a difficult question. This is it, right? Like, if you can address the data silos and their consequences, then you have your use case. You can definitely persuade business leaders that have had enough coffee that morning that this is a real problem, right? So I really like that answer. Yeah, we're actually approaching the end of the conversation here, but I would like to know your thoughts. I mean, you're not the first biologist. I think there is a thing with biologists. You've been trained to figure out, okay, where does this species belong in a classification tree of species, right? So I have known and worked with super skilled biologists in the past. So it's funny to hear that approach. Given the fact that you have worked in your entire career about with how to organize data, knowledge, information, and how to make it searchable again. In this very, very techy reality that you have pushed yourself into, how do you think generative AI will affect this? I have my own views on this, but I would be curious to know your view on it.
At this moment in time, and I'm now speaking about a time horizon of the next few years, I think this is a great time to be in the field of information science and information architecture. I think our work becomes more important, not less.
Yeah.
And I say that because what we know about targeted and focused solutions that require some level of generative AI capabilities and large language models or transformer architectures, they only work on vast amounts of content at very large scale. And we know all of the problems that can arise around lack of predictability and hallucinations. And if we start to bring that into the context of an individual company, especially companies in certain sectors like healthcare and financial services and pharmaceutical life sciences, the results or conditions that you see with generative AI today, in a broader sense, are not acceptable when you look at a specific domain and proprietary information inside a highly regulated industry. So that means that their knowledge, their domain of information, and certainly the information and data that is proprietary to an individual organization, needs to be well architected, needs to be understood, whether that's through sound metadata modeling and tagging, or a series of ontologies that help to kind of bring together the right relationships. There's a level of design and curation that needs to get applied before a big bank or a big pharmaceutical starts to do generative AI at scale, because the risk is too high for them to get it wrong. We are really very focused right now on the idea of retrieval augmented generation, right? Where getting the right answer is not necessarily just typing a query in and expecting everything to come back perfectly, but in some cases, the creative license that you are granting a large language model is okay, but in other cases, you want to have something between your query and the resulting answer to help guide and make sure that you are directing to the right answer and the right knowledge that's already somewhat managed or understood inside of your organization. And that's where we think having retrieval augmented generation and having this idea that if you've got the right answer, why would you want the generative AI to produce anything else? That's important. So, building use cases, helping our clients to understand the context, and almost elevating the importance of IA and metadata. That's what we're focused on. And I think that's going to be the focus for the next couple of years. So longer term, will there be AI, generative, or any other sort that can build contextual hierarchies that are very tuned to an individual company better than a set of taxonomists? Maybe, but we're not there for the next several years.
No, I agree in that, and I really think that you will have a lot to do in your company the many next years. I mean, I don't know to what extent this was a widespread belief, but there definitely was this idea floating around when ChatGPT 3 was released that there will be some sort of automated organization of data by artificial intelligence, and then as this as thoughts and experience matured, we could see more and more that once again, this was a fancy feature that would provide a lot of capabilities on top of your data architecture, but definitely not in the bottom where everything needs to be sorted out by human thought, or supported, of course, by a lot of technology. But there is a very, very important human activity that needs to be done, take place prior to these technologies providing extra capabilities for companies, right? So I completely agree in this. David, time is up, but it was a pleasure having you on. I will be discussing more with you after this episode. But thank you for joining.
Thank you, Ole. It was a pleasure.